Welcome back to my channel Celebuzz. Please share and subscribe and press the bell icon for new updates. My journey from antique queen to federal, the unfortunate decline of Danielle Colby. Danielle Colby, who was once iconic for liberation, allure, and defiance on Truth Television, which was once a dominant force, is now barely audible, while incarcerated, in a federal facility. Farewell bright camera lights, bygone eras of fashion, blunt grins in Iowa at the counter. This evening, Danielle is incarcerated following a stunning conviction implicated with she has been estranged from her long-term associate, Frank Fritz. 18 years in prison, a term shock to the United States. In the absence of courtroom drama, on television, non-stop action, background music, a single female singer with set their gaze upon the last results of a life that was once raging. American culture was enriched by Danielle Pickers, the individual whose heart broke stereotypes and flipped over the desk at workplace on a stage. However, she is now representing downfall, a bystander and intruder in a field that is aware the best way to construct myths and, as decimate them mercilessly. The subject lingering in the minds of anyone who encountered her, instead of wondering what made her act in this way. In the shadows, when visibility is low, scripts, a labyrinth of jealousy, authority, and the mysteries surrounding the circumstances surrounding Frank Fritz's demise is just the beginning. And deep into that labyrinth, Danielle Colby became disoriented. This tiny settlement of the Iowa town of Davenport, where maze grows lengthen indefinitely as time stands still as far as the Mississippi River, existed to shatter all conventions. Opposed to local females, she couldn't care less, due to inflexible curricula or boredom, of life in a tiny town. As a flame, a burlesque performer paired with body art that conveyed tales of rebellion. When she was on stage, she really shone, where her piercing stare and confident grin boosted her star power. In every step, each dance served as a protest against the typical. And before long, Danielle was emblem of liberty within the dark recesses regarding underground art. By 2004, destiny get her in contact with Mike Wolf, a long-lost friend of mine with a large fantasize about. Mike was the proprietor of a modest vintage store, and Danielle became office colleague's position, which at first glance appears to be standard in the areas of spreadsheets and email. However, during the 2010 season of American Pickers, a complete shift occurred. While first she was responsible for coordinating travels for two men named Frank Fritz and Mike searching through old barns for hidden riches. However, the kinetic energy, sharpness and charming personality and distinctive flair promptly took over the focus. Helping out the support crew, she became the show's heart and soul, the lady America was absolutely enamored with. My Name is Danielle wasn't merely selecting vintage items. Her character was revealing her true identity as a symbol of culture. Atwinkling, star over the middle of nowhere United States. American Pickers' triumph gave Danielle Colby more than just Aphimus face. Violently, it shook lurking beneath the surface of the show's polished surface. At first, the three of the trio of Frank Fritz, Mike Wolf, and Danielle was just the right amount. As a result of his the treasure hunts were guided by instinct. Hello. Frank's charisma and friendly demeanor was the core of the program. Furthermore, Danielle remained in the background. Onstage was the mastermind behind the scenes. He served as the glue that held everything here. Their journey, the nation as if it were a real family. Joking in dilapidated barns and crowded garages. Boot in the limelight of reality shows like A Razor's Edge started chopping linked together, while American farmers rose in popularity, faced increased fan pressure. Authors, along with their own goals, became more serious. The irresistible charm of Danielle was now more than simply the lady hidden from view. It seems like she was spending, more often featured on television, resulting bargaining and evaluating antiques alongside self-assurance that prompted Mike and "Hey Frank, pay attention." Because of this change, once the heart and soul of the perform seemed to be eclipsed. Upon spotting that, Danielle starts to get more mentions from the audience. Mike, his long-term business partner, appeared to leaning in her direction. Interpersonal conversations that do not include cameras. Mike and Danielle's relationship, their developing build trust, which made Frank feel more comfortable as in marginalized within the same society he served build. A gloomier turn occurred when a number of company emails were made public. In addition to Danielle had passed Mike's information on top personal details regarding Frank's temetable and individual viewpoints, concerns intended for private use. It was Frank, stunned. It was very disheartening. Upon his perceived Danielle as a sibling, a person he relied on to act as an impartial intermediary between Michael and him. However, he now pondered, was trying to influence the dynamics, in order to bolster her personal standing. Mike, who was always practical and icy, did barely any relief from the strain. He was in dire need. Hey there, Danielle. I knew you were a fan of the television set and was aware of how it remained current. Subdued debates inside the murmurs supplanted giggles, and Pickers ceased to be an enjoyable, exciting journey. Turned into a chessboard of authority in a world where trust is weak and mistrust is rampant, penetrated, fracturing a pair that had previously connected via camaraderie. Divided opinions on the trio of Frank, Mike Wolf, and Danielle Colby for Fritz American Pickers had become a quest for hidden riches into a serene, tense battleground. With a grin on the screen, which was now merely a covering for the being more wary and emotionally distant of the three. However, not even though the show's die-hard admirers may have, was prepared for the impending calamity. A catastrophe that would rattle not just people's life, but the total entire planet. It was announced on September 30th, 2024, that tragically, news of Frank Fritz's death spread like raging fire. The hospital's official report claimed that difficulties led to his death due to a stroke. It would appear that a verdict, considering his deteriorating condition in the last many years. Apologists for American Pickers over the nation expressed their sorrow. Tributes poured in from throughout the web, thinking back on the friendly face and clever tales of the cherished vintage collector. Still, behind all the sadness, some uneasiness started to take hold. Unease was pervasive. The work of Frank's death came at an inconvenient time, particularly given the dynamics within the trio continues to simmer. Controversy began going around and murmurs about a more sinister news started to circulate. Annie and Al erupted at the discovery of a journal within an abandoned Iowa warehouse where Frank had kept a great deal of all he held dear. This notepad, the trembling handwriting of Frank, a bomb waiting to go off. As it nears the end, he seemed to be growing increasingly wary of, "Hello, Danielle. She claims to be watching my medication, yet two no longer believe her." In his writing, I found that she was looking through my during which she whispered something. "To Mike believes I am deaf. I feel like something's removed." These passages weren't merely confessions. Allegations were made, portraying Danielle in a doubtful light, companion, yet an impending danger. Very soon the journal was on the front page, news, examined word for word by widely read in both tabloids and mainstream media. However, that was just the start. As a result of the persistence of anonymous advice, started to delve more deeply. Wireless tower. According to the data, Danielle was in the approximate the house where Frank passed out that night, in spite of her assertions that she is miles away. An anonymous eyewitness claimed to have seen an unidentified dark vehicle parked close to Frank's late at night in the company of a lady like Danielle, emerging from her hiding place. After that, arrived the compromised text exchange, Mike and Danielle dumping gasoline on the inferno. "Danielle has sent a single message, windows closed," was read. "It's just him. Known till morning, one checks." Mike responded, "Alone. It's done." The icy syntax, although incomplete, sufficiently sparked a tempest of public outcry on the internet. The # quantity. Justice for Frank was disseminated as inferno, changing Danielle's life from a well-known figure into the main suspect in a potential secret plot. With Frank's passing, it's only a private setback. Over time, it evolved into the catalyst that brings to light the concealed decayas part of American Pickers. Devotees who were loved the sand-covered road excursions and farm hunts has recently revisited previous episodes with on suspicion, looking for indications of turning traitor. At the same time, Danielle's stage remained quiet, scofflawed interviews and social media published works. But the fact that she remained silent merely served to heighten the on fire. The unanswered query, has Frank ended up dying from natural causes? Instead, could someone kindly shepherd him into the shadows? And what part did Danielle Colby play, if any, in long praised as the show's beating heart, perform within this tragedy? It started with just one unethical financial deal. Two at most days subsequent to Frank's demise, a wire movement of $215,000 showed up in Danielle's individual transaction, transmitted by Vintage Solutions, LLC, a front corporation linked to Mike Wolf and set up shop in a tax haven abroad secure location. At first, Danielle insisted it was business consulting fees. However, detectives weren't persuaded. The when, how much, and if or not openness and honesty were all red flags. A cruel forensic specialist probed further and observed that Danielle's expenditure had soared in the months leading up to and following death of Frank. She had splurged on a costly pet car, put money into side projects, even went so far as to buy a property right on the beach in island of Puerto Rico. As a tribute to a past adopted a minimalist way of life, these financial dealings presented a concerning visual representation. However, the finances were only that's missing from the whole. Of all other pieces of damning evidence, stolen communications, now hailing from the Backstage Productions phone staff member. To send a single terrifying message, the same evening, Danielle penned, "I shut the windows. It's just him. Allow destiny to decide. Handled," was Mike's reaction when asked to decide. Words were not specific enough, yet detectives and the general population was unable to overlook the implications. Having met with Mike and Danielle, purposefully put Frank in a precarious situation, condition, or much worse if they had served indirectly contribute to its onset. Expert witness specialists in the field of language acquisition observed the frequency with which Danielle reviewed the medicines and health status of Frank with Mike, details that are disturbingly congruent to the passages in Frank's journal, in which he thought Danielle had tinkered with his prescriptions. With the help of financial and technological specialists, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, FBI, broadened the investigation. Increasing numbers of transactions were followed by Vintage Solutions LLC onwards to their holdings associated with American Harvesters, exposing a tangled network of concealed monies. A departed employee defendant, the producer, stated that Danielle and rarely did Mike convene public gatherings to go over ways to control Frank. Brought together to back up Danielle's claims using data location close to Frank's house on that tragicer case began to take form that night. Conspiracy charges were brought against Danielle, auditing, possible financial mismanagement, and responsibility for Frank's demise. She and Mike were accused by the prosecution of driven by self-interest and the yearning to have command of the program, unintentionally neglected Frank both physically and in my career. As for Danielle, she had managed to lost their prominence. She declined every interview opportunity and appeared solely on social media photographing her when she was beckoned by official investigators from the federal government. Despite her absence, from dissipating the tempest, just made it worse, shocking the general population. She was familiar with hashtags Justice for Frank was trending on Twitter. Not only that, but 63% of people in America thought Danielle had related to the cause of Frank's demise. Asked the country as her court date drew near, gasped for air. Was Danielle ever going to talk and provide her perspective? Alternatively, may the secret she kept stifle her professional and personal pursuits and the end of her independence. There Danielle, a captivating emblem of defiance and charm on pickers from the United States, now entering the courtroom without expression, devoid of the self-assurance that formerly mesmerized people who listen. A gaggle of reporters gathered outside on behalf of CNN, TMZ, and influential internet users, fought for position as fans, split waiting for, caught between allegiance and fury, the subject of whether or not Danielle really desert Frank. As the trial progressed as an exhibition of certainty and uncertainty, the evidence in the form of text messages between Mike and Danielle, particularly passages such as, "Allow destiny to decide," and it's as proof that they had been attended to, forsook Frank, as he was experiencing a crisis. A single eyewitness, an ex-producer assistant who worked on the show, remembered snagging Danielle ravaging Frank's notepad while I mutter, "Can't let this destroy the whole thing." The state's case against this conduct states that purposefully sought to conceal the truth. Others who testified, including former pals to present to editors, painted, not in Danielle's role as a victim of situation, but in the context of financial woman who never lets her guard down. An editor working alone testimony indicating that Danielle frequently asked for revisions that improved her screen, during which time Frank's building a self-portrait as the protagonist of the American Pickers series. The defense of Danielle said that she was under Mike's influence. She resorted to experiencing anxiety in a demanding setting. According to them, the texts were missing background and failed to establish malicious intent, and given that the $175,000 in issue was a real compensation. However, these safeguards rapidly collapsed when faced with the increasing pressure evidence. An unexpected eyewitness who worked at Frank's company in the warehouse document was discovered and verified, as it had been days since Frank's dying while desperately trying to find a former portable electronic device. Following 3 days of discussion, the jury reached a decision. My name is Danielle Colby committed fraud, conspiracy, and together with carelessness that caused Frank's death. She received an 18-year prison term at Prison for Women at Alderson Federal Institution, renowned for its severe conditions. The iconic Danielle, who was once transitioned from freedom fighter to prisoner. The concrete walls are seamlessly blended with DC-044 and Alderson's fluorescent lights. From her success, notoriety, and the dazzling public persona fading American Picker's long-lost desire. The body art that represented her independence and was now used as sad remnants of a life that was the right way. As an inmate, Danielle was confined, alone without letting convicts hear their cliques and jail drama. She found safety in the inmate reading room, engrossed in books pertaining to ethics and psychology, as if looking for a way to comprehend the fire that, this chasm was previously her defining characteristic. The letters she sent her daughter in subsequent years got out there and exposed a shameful, "Hello, Danielle. I used to believe that being genuine fortified me. However, seeing that truth today has no value until responsibility. How much the trial will cost, liberty wasn't the only thing at stake. It caused a cultural figure to fall from grace and brought up difficult concerns regarding confidence, entertainment, and reality." Given that as Danielle was escorted out of the prison, everyone knew there was more to come. It was supposed to and high. Onto another chapter, one where the continuing testing of truth by mysteries that have not been solved. Here at Alderson, Danielle stayed quiet, directing, avoiding prison-related cliques and drama. There were no longer any stage lights, the cheers died out. For comfort, she turned to incarcerated individuals would spend countless studying the fields of ethics, psychology, and power. She found solace in these novels as analyzing the reasons for the defiant fire that had driven her on the road to failure. Danielle also started keeping a journal and his reflections in an undisclosed diary. The messages that she conveyed to her daughter, subsequently made public over the internet, exposed an individual dissimilar to the incisive, self-assured appearance on television. "I was mistaken to believe that being genuine was sufficient. Truth," she wrote, "without taking charge, there is only disorder." These words are brimming with feelings of shame and exposed understanding from a select few, but for the majority of people they sensationed as a tardy endeavor to rescue her likeness. Danielle shared her intentions to oust the pen name Colby to pen a memoir, committing to giving away all earnings to the Memorial Fund for Frank Fritz, and group offering assistance to autonomous lovers of antiquities. However, the decision was a tidal surge of condemnation. A certain amount grew popular, and many people accused her of making money off of Frank's passing. A handful of devoted followers persisted nonetheless, wishing this was the beginning of her journey in the direction of remission. Ignoring her honest goals, Danielle's celebrity faded, leaving behind just a hardly perceptible remnant of the lady who jolted the nation. This is the result of the case continued after Danielle passed away. It was a watershed moment in terms of actuality TV. To appease the furious people, the whole History Channel removed any and all prominently showcasing Danielle across its channels. Netflix and other streaming services removed 5+ reality shows aired on their collections, with YouTube deactivated views on footage from American Pickers. The case set off a chain reaction. Former members of the Storage Wars and Gold Rush teams, along with Deadliest Catch, which advanced with charges of playing out predetermined scenes, agreements, and goods that were planted. The unpleasant reality that the audience's preferred live broadcasts were meticulously dismantled artistic performances, confidence placed in the public. This sudden jolt caused larger shifts. Launched by the FCC was due diligence, and by the end of the year 2025, it was proposed by the U.S. Congress, a measure mandating openness regarding the degree of scripting that really occurs on television. Schools such as Stanford UCLA took Danielle's situation into consideration into courses on media ethics, referring to it the scandal in reality television, and that includes the antique sector took a major blow. Product sales declined by 35% as early adopters started casting doubt on the veracity of details associated with every object. The one headed by Danielle, the case had far-reaching consequences. It made a whole generation deal with a devastating, distressing inquiry. The truth behind the universe in which we had faith on board? However, as Danielle sat in jail library keeping a diary of her ideas, the society at large persisted in struggling with her lasting impact. Word of warning. A story on how much lying costs passed off as genuine. Here at Alderson, to avoid being probed, Danielle kept her mouth shut, gazes and hushed rumors within thieving area. She spent the majority of her time in this institution's library, where volumes on, she grew up studying ethics and psychology. Friends, who assisted her in analyzing the error that brought her to this point. Each letter, notably those that she penned, while incarcerated, slowly began to show up, even to her daughter despite her best efforts to prevent it. And Danielle wrote in one letter, "I did not speak up, not because I concurred with what occurred, but my fear caused it. Terrible fear of ruin, terrible fear that if the world I aided wouldn't make it build. Suddenly, it hits me. Being silent isn't get away. It's deceitful. These sincere and unfiltered statements sparked kindness in some, but in the eyes of many others, came across as being insufficient and delayed. A person who had previously used both center stage and in her fans' hearts support her. The narrative of Danielle goes beyond a tragic event in one's life. Picture this. It's a reflection, showing how trust is delicately balanced in contemporary community. The impact of her trial on how people perceive the world, the television audiences that were enthralled by Genuine at this very moment on American pickers viewed previous episodes with a wary eye, seeking indications of getting ready. Using the internet discussion boards were a hive of activity regarding the disagreements, the smiles, and relationships in which Danielle, Mike, and Frank had always existed. That's disappointments multiplied, and programs like As Tour of Antiques and Pawn Star Steep drops in audience participation. Their of Antiquities, which was once reborn via pickers in the United States, confronted a fall of collectors' reputation, started to decline examining the backstories of every price tag.